Tech 1302 here. Several people have shown interest in this Camry intake setup, so I figured I'd make a video for them, kind of go over this stuff. So there it is, a little overview. I guess starting up front, you can see I had to put a different elbow because the throttle body exits or enters at a different angle than the truck intake does. Let's see what else. Got my catch can. It comes into this top port on the Camry intake. Okay, that's important. At first I had it running, I ran it here, and I had the evap run here because it actually fits better. But if you try to run your evap line here, when it goes to run the evap the first time, if you fill the tank up, it'll actually misfire. So you have to run your evap here and your catch can here, which is exactly how the Camry has it from the factory. But you have to step up to a different hose size. Now, the throttle body itself has to be flipped upside down. I blocked the water ports. I just bypassed the line. It's just bypassed down there. It's got a little brass hose in it, brass connector. No problem. Didn't affect anything. It is low on the valve cover on the truck. So you can't run the one bracket. It's not a big deal. This intake's much smaller. It's pretty light. Now to run this here, I actually had to put a different size. Had to drill it and actually there's a brass fitting that is in there. I drilled it to a different size, tapped it, put the brass fitting. It's a NPT. I think it's maybe a quarter NPT. And I put JB weld around it as well to keep it from leaking. Okay? It works very well. It doesn't leak. This one over here, you'll see there's another one over here. If I can get a good view of it. Where's it at? I think it's up against the throttle body, almost covers it up. I think you can just see it right there. Yeah, right there. I plugged that one, and I put JB weld over the top of it. All right, next thing. The fuel line is under here. It is very close where it comes in. You're not going to be able to see it unless I pull the intake. Anyway, it's very close. You have to bend it maybe a quarter inch to get the intake to lay flat. I had to cut. There's a plastic tab on the intake that's right here. If I can get a view of it for you, right there, that will hit the fuel rail, that fuel rail pressure sensor. It'll hit it. You got to cut it off. Not a big deal. That's about it. The next biggest obstacle on this Camry intake is the AICS, the axe, getting it to work. The Camry is vacuum operated. The truck is electric, and it's a PWM. It's a completely different setup. So I have a stock Camry solenoid. The vacuum line goes here. Vacuum hose comes from there. It comes around. Check valve, vacuum check valve. Goes from there into a canister. Yes, that canister is very old. It's what I had laying around my shop. Should I get a new one? Probably, but it works for right now. Okay. I do recommend having some kind of canister. Make sure you have a good supply of vacuum to run the axe. Goes to right here. Then the out, which is the rear port on the solenoid, goes up, goes back to the actuator. Now, the kicker is this truck has no way to control it. You can't run it with the factory connector. You can't wire it into it. It doesn't work right. That's a straight 12-volt solenoid. This truck supplies a pulse width modulated 12 volts to the factory axe controller, and it will not work. It just won't. It'll turn it on, turn it off, turn it back off, turn it back on. It flips back and forth, and it goes crazy. It doesn't work right. So what you have to do, and as I'm going this way, you can see a little bracket I made up to make the evap valve. Here's the factory intake bracket. I'm using to hold my catch can. You see my wiring coming through for my axe stuff. That goes over, wiring comes over here. All right, here's the kicker. I had to figure out a way to run that PWM. So what I did was I have a Nitrous Express controller. And it's right here. And if I can get it to come out easily enough, I'm going to get it out. I'm going to show you what the part number is. That way, if you're interested in it, it is the TPS RPM. In fact, there's no part number on it. I'll link it in the video. That's it. And I have it wired in, and it wires in perfectly. It picks up perfectly. It reads the correct RPM and TPS. I wired it into one of the TPS wires off the throttle body and off the number 1 coil pack to get my RPM and TPS. I have it set up at about 45% throttle and 2100 RPMs, which is for the Camry intake, not for the truck intake. Truck intake does it turns on at 25 or 26 and then back at 36 or 34, whatever you set it up for. So that works very well. So the axe operation is no longer with the PCM, it's with that. And actually, when I first did it, I had it wired up, I had it in my hand, I'd drive down the road, turn it on at different times. I've tried from 1900 all the way to about 22, I found 21, which I believe is stock for the Camrys. It worked very well. And turning it off at about 39 to go back to the short runner. So your long runner runs from about 21, about 4,000, depending on throttle position and RPM. And it works great. It works great. Now, I will tell you this, if you're not running that axe valve on a Camry intake, you will lose performance down low. 0 to 60 times were off until I got that to operate properly. Once I started operating properly, it worked very well. Now, that's a very brief overview as far as what I had to do. It took me about 2 hours to actually get the intake on the truck the first time. I've had it on and off several times since then. I ported the intake, messed around with other stuff, had it on and off a couple times. But the initial mounting the intake is not a big deal, but the small stuff takes a little while, especially with that axe. Now, once I figured out that window switch, that nitrous window switch, it works great. I recommend it if you want to do this intake. That's the way I would go. Now, what do I recommend this intake for? I put this intake on here to improve RPM power, and specifically for me, the mile per hour difference between 1/8 mile and 1/4 mile to make the motor continue to make power up high. It works. The motor doesn't fall flat. It'll pull whatever RPM you want it to. It's a pretty flat. I mean, it flattens out at 6,800, 6,900, but it still makes decent power. It doesn't drop off like the truck intake. I do not recommend running this intake if you guys set a 35-inch tall tires on stock gears. You're not going to like it. It does lose a little bit of power, part throttle down low. Now, when you get into heavy amounts of throttle, it really doesn't lose anything, and especially when you get into RPMs, it doesn't. I've towed with it. It tows fine. It does fine with my truck, but I got stock tires. Now, I recently did 430 gears, and with the 430 gears and stock tires, that intake it rips. It does great, exactly what you want it to. It runs like a scalded dog. Like I said, I don't recommend it if you got big tires, unless you got a gear. If you put 529s in it, you got 35s, I'm sure it'd be fine. Next thing is tuning. I don't know if you're able to tune it yourself, if you have the software and stuff. My cam angle's changed a little bit. I will tell you this: the amount of timing, ignition timing, changed a little bit. How much timing I could put in, or how much timing I had to take out. So the tuning changed up a little bit. So you're gonna have to be able to do your own tuning. So I mean, this is kind of a hot rodder type mod. You have to be able to do it yourself and kind of figure it out yourself. But it worked for what I wanted to. For what I wanted to do, it worked. I do recommend, if you had a Pro Charger, a Supercharger, I recommend that intake because it would probably make a good bit more horsepower than the truck intake, especially up high. And one other thing it does not do, the truck intake has that big dip of power when the axe is operating around 26, 2700, that big dip in power and that big surge back when it closes back up open. When it closes, that's not there anymore. So it's smoother, even if it has a small reduction in torque prior to that. It does not have that big surge, dip, and surge in power, and you can feel it too. You put the truck intake on here. I don't care when you activate the truck intake, a truck axe system, low, high. When you move the activations on it, it has that surge. This intake does not. I like it. It serves me well. I'm not going to put the truck intake back on it. I'm not getting rid of the truck. I'm gonna keep the truck. It's mine. It's not going anywhere. And I'm gonna keep this Camry intake on it. I like it. It runs good. It does its job, and it produced the results I wanted it to produce. If anybody has any questions, they can put comments below. Besides that, good luck with it, and I will try to put up other videos explaining other things about the truck. I'm going to the track in a couple days. I'm trying to get a 13-second pass out of it. I'm pretty sure it's going to do it. I'm going to pull a little bit of weight out, and I'm going to go for it and try to be the first 13-second in a 3rd-gen Tacoma. Why not? Truck runs good around town. It's fun to drive. It's not a bore to drive. You can go down the interstate, step on it, accelerates, passes people. Doesn't get outrun by everybody on the side. Everybody on the street can outrun you now, which I think is kind of nice. But y'all comment. Let me know what you think.